everyone, and welcome to the Grit and Bear It podcast. It is that time of year, boys and girls, where we are excited and we are out there, and it's summer, it's the dead of summer, heat wave, mid July. That means schedules, boys and girls. That means we have a full blown 76 game schedule season to pick through and dissect. And of course, to do that is my partner in crime, Corey Schwartz of Bears Hockey Nation, his own blog. He does it all himself. Corey, thank you so much, brother, for joining me here today.
Yeah, man, definitely happy to be here. As you said, we got 72 more games to look forward to for next season, and it's going to be, the countdown's already on a little bit sooner than usual. So we got a lot to look forward to, and a little bit sooner than usual too.
So, for some of you Bears fans, intelligent Bears fans that are watching this or listening to this, the Bears are starting a week sooner. That's because the NHL is starting a week sooner because of the collective bargaining agreement. Less training camp for the NHL. That's went from 6 games down to 4. One of them at Giant Center this year, but that's another show, September 21st. But because the NHL is starting earlier, that means we start earlier. So that is why it's the first weekend in October as opposed to the second. A lot of old school Bears fans will know that usually Bears hockey started around the first weekend, but typically the Bears would always start out on the road.
Yeah, it's kind of an interesting change in the schedule there that, we're going to start the season with a lot of home cooking all at once, where it's going to be, we were basically home for 7 straight games, almost all the weekends of October, the first 3. And, like you said, a little bit earlier, NHL is moving up to 84 games. The preseason schedule is a little truncated this year compared to what we saw in the past. And that's a good thing for us because we get back to hockey a little bit faster. And, also by virtue, that means it'll be a slightly shorter spring summer if the Bears will make the Calder Cup and, win it again. There will be no more June 24th that the Calder Cup is lifted. That's gonna be a thing of the past, at least by a week. Not too terribly less, but still enough that we'll be feeling the impacts a little bit, and that's okay.
Yeah, I don't have a problem uh, with with everything starting sooner. I'm more than happy to have the playoffs end a little bit sooner. I think the playoffs ending at the end of excuse me here for a second. I think the playoffs ending at the end of June is a bit ridiculous. Actually, it's a lot ridiculous, but that's just me. So we are. Sorry, I'm getting sidetracked. Sorry.
Oh no, you're good. I do have a good thought for you if you want me to just.
Go for it.
Working on something. The one thought that I had was when I was posting clips on my Bears page about on this day and X date or Y date or whatever. It was kind of interesting because like you go back and look from when the Bears won the Calder Cup in 2010 with that 4-0 win over Texas versus Matt Strome's goal in 2024. You sort of have the ends of the extreme. Even like 2009 was even sooner by a few days type of thing. It was impressive because it's like you kind of took for granted how how late that so there's always something that plays into effect in different ways, but how how much sooner that this really ended. And it's something that I think the AHL kind of got away from for different reasons. And I think it's kind of good they're kind of reining it back, even if it's just a week. It'll still go later than that, of course, but reining it in even by a week does wonders for everybody. Everyone's usually pretty tired after 2 months of playoff hockey with the play-in round and all that stuff that adds on to it. Totally good thing, I think, to sort of rein that in by just even a week.
Yeah, even I'm like, once my teams are no longer in it, by the time June hits, I'm like, okay, all right, I'm ready. My wife is watching Banana Ball a lot more than she's watching hockey, so we're just, we're done here. Let's pack up camp and let's go. But yeah, I'm completely with you. For all of you that are watching this, please like the Grit and Bear podcast YouTube channel. Fresh new content will be coming as we get closer to hockey season. Shameless promotion, I assure you. But but we're here to talk about what the Bears' schedule is going to be, and the and we got word that before the schedule did drop, we got the word that um, opening day was going to be October 3rd. We got that. We knew that. And the opponent was revealed to be none other than the Charlotte Checkers. The Charlotte Checkers are going to be our first and second opponent this year, as Charlotte will be doing pretty much what they usually do. Starting the season on the road, they'll be 2 weeks away from Mr. Bojangles Coliseum before they open things up. But the Bears will be playing the Charlotte Checkers, proud affiliate of your Florida Panthers. And the thing is with Charlotte this year, and I noticed we had a good amount of turnover. Charlotte's doing that too this year. So it'll be a very interesting weekend to go up against Charlotte, because these two teams are going to be nowhere near like what we're going to see out of Charlotte later in the year.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how Charlotte lines up for that game versus when we see them, later on in the season. Like you said, it's going to be pretty different for them. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised they're going to be taking the lead from their NHL affiliate and having some toughness. I mean, when we saw some signings over the summer, like Boko Imama being, likely a Charlotte Checker, maybe, there. I don't know if there'll be too much more room in the toughness squad up in Florida for him up there possibly, but never say never. Of course, Florida is going to be a very tough team to handle the NHL level, and I wouldn't be surprised if Charlotte's kind of built to match in some ways there.
Yeah, I completely agree on that, because I think I think Charlotte is still going to be the annoying pain in the butt team that we always know them to be, but I just I don't know, with Charlotte this year, it really felt like they missed their chance 2 years ago. But we can always delve into that on another show. But we will get Charlotte to definitely start the season this year. Saturday and Sunday will be opening weekend, but we have to talk about the elephant in the room a bit when it comes to something like this, because the Bears also announced that this year they are experimenting with 6 p.m. Saturday starts. Now these will be on. Sorry. These will be opening night. We'll have another one in October, and then these will be done throughout the winter after Christmas Candy Lane closes. There was concern, with a friend of mine and a few others in Bears Nation, that this was going to happen with Christmas Candy Lane, which closes usually around 9 or 10. That would mean Bears getting out and the park letting out, which, if you know, that's never a good idea. So thankfully that's not going to happen. I don't mind it. I've seen a lot of complaining from Bears fans, a lot, and you know who you are, that oh, well, I work to 6, this doesn't work out for me crowd. Or you have the families of, oh, this is great for younger children, you get home by 9 o'clock, which you are not wrong when it comes to that. But just can't please everybody, I guess.
Yeah, I was going to say, my 2 cents in it is I love it, honestly. I think it's kind of nice you get in there a little sooner, you get it done. I wouldn't even be opposed to having afternoon start times, every so often, which I'm sure would, drive some people up a wall. I'm sure, Richard, you remember probably the pandemic 2021 season where almost all the games were, noon, 1, afternoon times and stuff. I know I'm digging in the memory banks a little bit for, it seems like a fever dream still in some ways, but, some of those odd start times were kind of nice. And it's kind of nice, Saturday, obviously, I have no problem dedicating my Saturday nights to Bears games. But, you just, you get things going a little sooner, you get home a little sooner at night type of thing. It'll probably help for those few games, this weekend's, opening weekend is one of them where, you have a later start turned around into an afternoon start the next day. We've seen that before on teddy bear toss weekends and things like that. It just gives you 1 extra hour, which doesn't seem like a lot, but matters a ton for everybody involved. To just give them that, even that little bit of time extra, to work on things, get through things, be done with things, type of thing. So I'm all for it. I think it's a good start. It's a good time because I hate to say that they took a page out of Wilkes-Barre's book with the 6 o'clock start times, but they're one of the teams that also has done that sort of thing. In addition to some other oddities, like Lehigh Valley does their odd start times, even if they're on PPL time, which is 15 minutes late, type of thing.
Ah,
Everybody kind of gets through their things a little faster, and that hour makes a big difference. You come back from Wilkes-Barre after a 6 p.m. game versus 7, that hour is huge. So I'm all for it. I think it's great.
I work 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. on weekends, so I am not the biggest fan of it. At least
And it's the other side.
Yeah, I was trying to get first shift. That didn't really work out, but if I didn't have my job, I wouldn't mind it like as much because I get it. You're done by 9. Most Bears fans will be home by 9:30. That's a big difference than 10:30. And especially if, even with my job, I get home by 9:30 on something like that, and I got to be up at 5 a.m. the next morning, trade one for the other. So that's a way of looking at it. Is it perfect? No. Do they do this for select games? I'm fine with that. I don't think going permanently 6 is the better idea, but
Totally
it wouldn't surprise. I think this is experimental, and this could be like the 1 p.m. Sunday start games where okay, we tried it for a season, it didn't work, we will never speak of this again. But I think this could work out a bit. I'm not in the camp of, oh no, this shouldn't happen, this is terrible, this is horrible, blah blah blah. No, I think that this is a decent. It's good to experiment with something like this, especially with the multitude of issues Giants Center has. But that's another show that I will deal with in the summer. So we have that. We have. No, sorry. Well, that almost went horribly bad. we dealt with that, and we will go into the following weekend as the Bears will welcome back an old friend, an old frenemy, deep in the heart of Texas. The Hershey Bears will be taking on the Texas Stars for the first time in 15 years. The boys from Eastern Texas will come back to Giants Center, to the scene of the crime. They're in Game 6. The Bears beat the Stars to claim their 11th Calder Cup. But I was really excited when I saw this. This is a team I wanted to see the Bears play for a long time. Should have done it last year on the 15th anniversary of it, but I'm being picky. But I love this. They're getting it out of the way early, which will be fine for Texas. I'm really excited to see them at Giants Center. This will be the more traditional 7 o'clock start and 5 o'clock start there at Giants Center that weekend. And I'm all for this. More of this, please.
Yeah, it's interesting because it still follows the same formula that the Bears have sort of had in their schedule matrix the last couple of years, where most years they have just one Western Conference opponent. Last year was Rockford, I believe. And the year prior to that, I believe Chicago was the team that filled in this exact slot, as a matter of fact, where it was second weekend of the regular season. 2 games at home and then 2 games on the road later on and down the road in March. So it's like you said, it's really nice that it's Texas this year. Like you said, it's the first time they've met since the 2010 finals, first time in the regular season ever, which is, it's kind of hard to believe it's taken this long. But, in some ways, you kind of wonder why just them. Would it be okay to try for other teams in the same season too? But, it is nice to get one of these, highlight on your week, your calendar, is a must-see game. You don't see the matchup very often. just wish you saw it a little bit more often. As I'm sure we'll, hear comments and see things about the frequency of other teams versus, getting some variety. But your travel logistics are of course king, and it's not cheap to take these teams to Texas to Hershey and back again type of thing. So, like you said, just to see even this matchup at all is really something. And I even saw a few Bears fans saying, "Oh, I live closer to Texas. That when they're in Texas in March, like I'm going to go see them there." And some people that you know, like my one good buddy Brian, he's out in Texas all the time. He's been to Stars games for non non Bears opponents, of course. But he said, "Oh, it'd be so great to have the Bears out there again." And if he's not at those games on the road in March, I will be shocked. So that's shout out Brian, honestly.
I think this is the farthest Western opponent that we have had in quite some time. I'm not counting playoffs, everyone, so don't at me with, oh, we played Coachella Valley in the finals. Doesn't count. I said regular season. First one in a long time. And it's a step closer. It is a step closer to my dream of the Bears playing the Henderson Silver Knights out there in Henderson, Nevada. I'm using that as a cheap excuse to make a long weekend out in Vegas. They're only 25 minutes away from the Strip, people. But yeah, good to see the Texas Stars. Great to have them back. Fantastic uniforms. I'm very much looking forward to that uniform matchup that weekend. So good on them. Great to have them back. And then to round out the home and, well, not necessarily, the last 3 games of the October run, the Bears are starting 7 straight at home to start the season. Long are the days when the Bears would start out the season on the road. The Bears will be playing the Providence Bruins. 6 o'clock, 3 o'clock start October 17th and 18th. And then Belleville comes to town for a one and only Saturday game against the Barbershop Pole Boys from Canada. So that's an interesting stretch to end it. I mean, you're catching Providence early before they level up in the season. So if you want to play them, that's when you want to do it. It'll be interesting to see Providence in here so early in the season.
Yeah, Providence has always historically been a measuring stick opponent for the Bears. It's you thought about it both, the 3 times I think it was at the beginning of the season last year where the Bears were the first team to beat them on the road. That sort of thing. That was a big step for that team. Ultimately didn't quite show where they wanted to be at that point. But, and then again in, I guess it was late November, early December, I believe, where, the Bears lost to them twice, and you kind of realize, put you back on back on planet Earth type of thing. But one thing I do want to note about this schedule that I thought of today leading up to our show here was that Matt Strome mentioned, I believe it was Matt Strome, end of the season, that the stretch the Bears had at home last summer or last season, I want to say this would have been like November, December, probably type of thing, where they were close, they were able to practice a lot. He said that was so important for them for bonding that they, were able to, not have to worry about travel and some things like that. I think it's kind of interesting that we're getting that so early because you're going to have, training camp presumably for a week or 2 before this, leading up to the regular season starting. Not a lot of travel for the preseason, maybe up to Wilkes-Barre, maybe to Lehigh for a game type of thing. This will be a big stretch to see if maybe the Bears can kind of get that bonding done early and maybe have a better first half of the season. Not that they were terrible last season, but just to be a little bit better, to get that bonding, that sort of trust building stuff. Because there's you look at the schedule, it's Saturday, Sunday, the whole way through. You got 5 days between sets of games here. Like that's fantastic. They've almost never had that, so it's a really good thing I think this early in the season to maybe see if maybe that happens a little bit faster as a result. But like you said, you're not getting too far ahead of yourself. Those 3 games there, all of them are tough. Belleville usually gives you a run for your money. Providence is always a test. And, haven't seen Texas in years. You'll be seeing former Bear Mike Scarbosa with the Stars this time around type of thing. That's going to be a headline part of the event too. So, no easy games in that stretch for sure.
No, not at all. And, for people wondering, it's only a 2-2 with Providence this year. So if you want to see them, get your butt to Giant Center that weekend because that's it. for Providence at home. We will not see them again until January 8th. And then the second game for that will be on April 9th. So really elongated to where we stretches against Providence. Again, a team that the Bears have always struggled against. So at the end of October, the Bears will hit the road for a 2-game set up in upstate New York and Canada, as they will take on the Rochester Americans and the current reigning and defending Toronto Marlies up there at Rico. No, it's not Rico Suave Coliseum anymore, but they're at Coca-Cola Coliseum. And then the Bears will be back that Sunday for our first of many against Wilkes-Barre. So a nice little 2-step there up to New York and then right back home to take on Wilkes-Barre.
That's some tough travel too, right off the bat. It's not to travel to Rochester is not like a crazy amount type of thing. Like it's not the worst travel in the world, but you kind of neglect the miles that it takes to get up to Toronto and back as well. Where those are going to be some tough teams. Toronto, I'm sure unless they get absolutely demolished in the offseason, you'll be seeing first reunion with former Bear Henrik Grabinski. Weird to say that still. For that game, there's going to be some changes. Toronto's never a slouch, though. I mean, they're always tough. Rochester always, even when they were like 500 last season, they always gave the Bears a hard time. So those are two tough travels. Some longer ones, and then you have to follow it up by coming home and dealing with Wilkes-Barre. It's going to be, and then it's all division opponents for that whole week. So it is going to be a challenging stretch there. And like you said, more matchups with Wilkes and Lehigh Valley, which I know. Probably fans out there are probably groaning over hearing me say that, but you're going to be keeping your enemies close and your friends closer over the holidays here. That's for sure.
Very much so. That is a good amount of miles up to Rochester, and perhaps the good thing about that is that the Rochester one is a Wednesday, and it's a hike, about a good 6 hours up there, but at least you get up there, you have some time to travel, and then over to Toronto's not too bad. But that Toronto home Friday night back to Giants Center, that's going to be the first weekend where it's going to be a groaner for the boys, where they're going to get back probably at like 3 or 4 in the morning, try and get some sleep, and then be right back at it on Sunday mornings. General hint, boys, it gets easier once you get to February and March. But we'll see Wilkes-Barre. We'll see how that team shakes out, especially with as good as they were last year. But the following week, the Bears will take on the Hartford Wolfpack, 7:00 start on a Wednesday night, and then once again back up to the Northeast as they will double dip against the Springfield Thunderboys, the Fighting Steve Otts, up there at Mass Mutual Center. And I will just say this now to get this out of the way, Bears fans: there is no Saturday home games this year. Now, let me repeat that. There is no Saturday home games this year. 7th on the road, no game on the 14th, road 21st, road 28th. So a bit of a weird anomaly there, as the Bears will be traveling up to Springfield with, who's, I think, going to be really difficult to play against this year.
Well, I think you're right about that. Springfield's always pretty tough, and like I said, I think it'll be interesting if we do another show talking about the different teams in the Atlantic and how they're. I'm sorry, in Hershey's division here. Yeah, it is the Atlantic. I'm thinking of the NHL. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
It's tough to keep that all straight sometimes, but it'll be interesting if we do a show kind of like going over the opponents in the division and figuring out who's kind of got the edge or improved or fallen off a little bit. I'll be curious to hear your thoughts about Wilkes-Barre personally. It's going to be tough. I mean, this is a lot of divisional play is happening in the month of November and December, and these are all tests too. I mean, Springfield doesn't seem they were not that great obviously on paper, but they pushed right into I'm trying to remember the playoff picture. They've actually got ahead of the Bears, I believe. Now that my memory's coming back of last season, they surged, they did really well. And so, no team here is really, as we found out last year, there's no easy games anymore. There's no throwaway games where you can score 4 points in a game or whatever. It just doesn't happen that way anymore. So, like you said, it's going to be tough because you're traveling up and back and then up again within the span of a week. Tough travel for the guys here, and like you said, no Saturday home games is a huge anomaly here too. But that doesn't mean we're lacking for home games at the very least. It's just all Fridays, Sundays, and Wednesdays, which is a very odd slate. But you know, we'll make up for it at some point, I believe.
I am thoroughly convinced that we were um, one stout defensive play and maybe a bad bounce away from having the chaos division final between us and Springfield, which it easily could have happened. I shouldn't say easily, but was on the table. But yeah, Hartford on a Wednesday and then going up to Springfield. The Mass Mutual Center is always a tough place to play. I've been up there, great arena, great people, cramped on each other. So on a second. On there. Come on, stop doing this. Okay. So yeah, that's gonna be interesting to see how all this will continue to play out as we throughout the month of November. Then on November 11th, we will see the first ever visit of the Hamilton Hammers will come to Giant Center, and then a Wednesday night game against Wilkes-Barre, and then a 3:00 start against Charlotte on a Sunday. I'm not a fan of the name the Hamilton Hammers. I don't like their jerseys. It is. I'm not a fan. I could see, who knows, put them on the ice and I could be pleasantly wrong. But we will welcome the newest team to the league in the Hamilton Hammers on the 11th. And then we'll have Wilkes-Barre and then Charlotte come in. More division games as we head through the month of November.
And it's kind of interesting because Hamilton's kind of responsible for a lot of things. First off, I agree with you. I think their jerseys were kind of It's too much of the same with an Islanders affiliate where it's, I feel like Hamilton deserves to have a unique name like the Bulldogs. And, maybe that's just the, old coded in my brain type of thing that I expect. But, it's neither here nor there. But the other interesting thing, and we'll probably get to this in a different show in depth, but Hamilton switching up the divisions a little bit means there's only 7 teams in the Atlantic versus last season. So the North will kind of adopt the Atlantic's old playoff format where there will be, I'm sorry, I'm losing my train of thought. In the Atlantic division, you will have 3 teams that earn buys and just one play-in series of 3 games. And that's in between 4th and 5th place to, be in that competition there. So it's going to be a little bit of a different look, and I think that contributes to a little bit of why the schedule is a little different from years past. You're not getting as many games against the Islanders affiliate. There's only 7 teams. That's probably why Wilkes-Barre and Lehigh Valley are back up to 12 games. There's some little interesting aspects to kind of consider in there too. But yeah, that'll be a hot game for a Wednesday to see the newest AHL team, the Hamilton Hammers, and then you have some, a brief 4-game homestand here over those couple of weeks there. It's going to be harder to find those as the season goes on here too. So enjoy the home cooking, and hopefully the Bears can put together some big wins in that span too.
Well, they're going to need it because, as usual, we have a lot of, and through the first part of the season. Heading into the Hollandaise season, as the Bears will play the Rochester Americans on a Friday night. Then a Saturday night, they will travel to Lehigh. And then, as usual, the tradition, unlike any other, the Thanksgiving Eve game is back against Wilkes-Barre. You want to talk about a hot ticket? That is it, my friends. That is going to be a packed house that night, and I will love it. And then the Bears are going to do what everyone else does. Get out of town for Thanksgiving weekend as they will travel to Charlotte for a pair of 4:00 games to close out the month of November. So, some home games there, the 20th and the 25th, and then, heading down to North Carolina for Thanksgiving weekend.
Yeah, it wouldn't be surprised if they celebrate Thanksgiving on the road or if they get out of town a little bit sooner after the the Wednesday showdown there. But that's another important stretch of games there. I mean, again, it's divisional play, so we really want to put your best foot forward. Get some points against Wilkes-Barre. I mean, you're going to have 3 games at home against them just in the month of November alone. That's half your home schedule against them is out of the way by that point, and we're going to get sick of them real fast here. Through these 2 months here, more or less, and Charlotte, 2 4 p.m. starts over that weekend. Black Friday game on the road. Some important road games there for the Bears to try to get some points on. And like you said, think about back in 2023 how tough it was for the Bears to win in Charlotte and how much of a mountain that was that they overcame to beat them in the first round. And it always seems like you have to have at least some moment playing in Charlotte over the course of a season to prove your moxie and your medal type of thing. So, would expect that those games should be ones highlighted for, a moment or a big showing from the Bears if they are to, truly regain their footing as one of the Atlantic Division's top teams.
Charlotte's always tough. I've made multiple visits down to Mr. Bojangles Coliseum. It is just, it's a tough place to play because rowdy fan base, great old arena, very lively boards. There's just something about arena that's just really hard to play at. And you're right. It's always a test your mantle type game whenever you go down there to Charlotte. It is never easy. Quick comment here from John DeRosser. Thank you very much. Commenting when we were talking about the playoff system, that's a better playoff format. What we had felt more like a participation trophy where everybody gets in. Thank you, John. I'm not a fan of these play-in games. I'm not. We'll just do on that real quickly. I've never liked these best of threes, just because they do feel like a participation trophy. Everybody gets in, especially if you're a journalist. I'll quote friend of the show Patrick Williams. You can't write storylines and narratives for a best of 3 series. It's literally a bad night and a bad bounce, and you're done. And it's just I'd much rather go back to the 4-4 or the 5-3 teams get in and everybody does a best of 7. But, what do I know? I'm just a guy with a camera and a microphone. So, John, I appreciate it. And I've never been a fan of this bloated playoff system where 23 of the 32 teams get in.
One thing I will throw in there is you had the best and worst of that in the North Division last season is that, so the top 3 teams that made it in the North Division, Laval, Syracuse, Cleveland, all got buys. Who finished at 4th place and had to play in a play-in series in order to advance were those Toronto Marlies, who I think were the first team to play in that series to eventually go on to win the Calder Cup, which is kind of a, I hate to say, unfortunately, there's a reinforcement for this format that there ever was. That's probably it. But, like John kind of mentioned, is that there is a, sort of participation trophy. We saw, on the flip side of that, they played Rochester, who finished 10 points below them, at a 500 record, had to clinch a playoff spot by getting to overtime against the Bears on the end of the regular season. So it's kind of an interesting dichotomy where, like John kind of alluded to, is that it's for some teams, it's like, okay, do you really deserve to be here? Probably not. And then you kind of look at, on the flip side there for Toronto is that, and I think this is what the league probably wants those teams to look like a little bit more. 82 points. They're 1 point behind the Monsters for what would have been a bye type of thing. Maybe helps them heat up a little bit and, gain some momentum and steal against some other teams. So, there's good arguments to be made either way. And, obviously we saw kind of the mid-off, for lack of a better word, last year in the Atlantic where at times it felt like who wanted it the least kind of thing, where it was just sort of a slog to get through that. So I see both sides of that too. I think it's, it adds more fuel to the playoff race, but not when it's, it's a 500 team trying to escape mediocrity just to, make the playoffs type of thing. So I see it both ways.
Yeah, I completely get that. So, so John, thank you for your comment, brother. Thank you for checking in. Any other Bears fans watching, do not be afraid to comment as well. So we get into the month of December, and guess what, Bears fans? Do you like the Phantoms? Do you like the Phantoms? Do you like them? You like the Phantoms, don't you? Drink up! Drink as much as you can! 4 straight games against the Lehigh Valley Phantoms. I need to speak to your manager, please and thank you. 4 games against the Phantoms to start January 2nd at the PPL Center, December 5th back at Giants Center, December 6th back at the PPL Center, December 12th at the PPL Center, and then the 12th up there down the 476, or is it the 78? Anyway, you know what I mean. Then to play Wilkes-Barre at 305. Sheesh, 4 straight games against Lehigh. Are you kidding me? This is where I have beef.
We are on PPL time officially. You can take all 3 of those starts on the road at the PPL Center in Allentown, Pennsylvania to from there. Yeah, I was supposed to say it's 7:15, 3:15. Disregard what it says. It is 15 minutes, not 5. So you will have your Lehigh Valley and you will like it. You're going to be dealing with these guys. And the good news is that after I think this actually is the first time all season the Bears will see the Phantom. No, they had one in November there on the road as well. We talked about that already.
But still, that's a month and a half without playing Lehigh. So
exactly, that's 4 out of your 6 games in Allentown are done by December 11th. So that's the only good news is that you will have your fill and then hopefully none of it for a little while. And that's good news.
Yeah, but then we get a game against Charlotte that following Sunday, 5 o'clock start, and then do you like Wilkes-Barre? Remember that fun playoff series we had? Wasn't that great? Drink! You want Wilkes-Barre. You need that rivalry. Drink! 4 out of 5 against Wilkes-Barre. Oh my gosh. I know. Well, what's wrong with playing your rivals? This is the stuff that Bears fans complain about. This stuff right here. 8 out of 10 games against specifically 8 out of 9 specifically against Lehigh and Wilkes-Barre. This is the crap that Bears fans complain about, and are rightfully so about it. More variety. Stretch the taffy out. I get it. It's the holidays. This is where Giants Center makes a good amount of its money from Bears games. I get it, but I don't need 4 helpings of Wilkes-Barre. I don't. I want a bit more variety at my buffet. Thank you very much.
I'm sure if you're somebody like if you could, get some truth serum to Zach Fish, maybe he would probably tell you that, hey, this is great for us because we don't leave the state of Pennsylvania at all during the month of December. We are, basically home for the holidays here this entire time. Once they get back from Charlotte around Thanksgiving, and that's great. We're happy for them, but we'll be searching for some hearing aids after listening to the loud presentations that are in both Allentown and Wilkes-Barre, their respective arenas. Those are 2 loud buildings, and that's going to be grating. And in some ways, if you want to look at the positive side, this is a playoff style schedule between those 2 rivals, where you will have to either push or push back, and it will create some instant hatred when anytime you play a team 4 times in a row like that, Lehigh and Wilkes-Barre in particular. But you've already seen Charlotte a few times by this point, 4 times I think for them. So these are some teams that it's going to bring some instant hatred. Even Rochester, I mean, they will have seen by this point too. So not quite as much, but these are all ones where it's going to be known quantities, tests in that respect, and just like last season where the Bears kind of fell off in mid to late December in a lot of ways. This is a chance for them to really buck that trend too in Derek King's second season. So again, you can't win a playoff spot in December, but you certainly can lose them if the Bears can't figure this one out too.
Yeah, and you're going along those lines, to a friend of the show, Zach Fish, to kind of play along those lines. The Bears don't leave the state of Pennsylvania the entire month of December. They don't. Their only road games are literally Lehigh and Wilkes-Barre. Charlotte, Rochester, Cleveland, they're all at home. So just along that lines, the entire month of December, the Bears are not leaving Giants Center. But hey, it's the most wonderful time of year. I keep getting told in holiday songs. So after our bit with Wilkes-Barre, that takes us pretty much through the holiday season, and then December 30th, the Bears will play the Rochester Americans. I think that'll do it for our home slate against Rochester this year. And then we head into the new year and calling it right now, January 2nd and 3rd. Get that? Yep, January 2nd and 3rd against the Cleveland Monsters. I'm calling it right now. There's your teddy bear toss, Jan 3rd. That's it. It's you're halfway to summer game. That's Saturday. That's Sunday. That Sunday will be your teddy bear toss game. And in the words of a banana ball commentator, book it. That's exact. I'm calling it.
I was going to say the same thing. I think in my article I wrote last week about it, I said the same thing. I think that this, January 3rd has the best chance for that. But then I was kind of looking ahead and I was like, man, it kind of, you almost wonder if it could be that game on the 10th. Also a 3 p.m. start. Obviously, they, would turn around and play another game on the 12th at home on a Tuesday. The only Tuesday game of the season, thank goodness for that. It's a little interesting because I mean they're both 3 p.m. starts, and I was thinking to myself like, what were the odds? But obviously the Bears are traveling in from Providence, as we'll get to here in the next week. But I was kind of thinking to myself like, there's usually one day that sticks out, and this one does a little bit more. But that would be a repeat offender for the teddy bear toss, if I'm not mistaken, from a season ago. So I'm kind of, it makes more sense for the 3rd. It's usually that first Sunday in January, but it's kind of interesting. You could almost make an argument for the 10th if you really wanted to.
You could, and you definitely have a ton of Wilkes-Barre people who would come down just to participate. It's for the kids.
See a real teddy bear toss. Oop, was that the wind?
Well, hey, it's for the kids. Doesn't matter if 300 or 900 or nearly 100,000 gets thrown on. It's for the kids. No one's keeping score. Nobody's keeping score. Anyway, but yeah, I think I could see that 3 o'clock being Wilkes-Barre, but knowing probably that Saturday probably has something going on at Giant Center, so it's just too good with Cleveland. It really seems like it's there.
I agree.
But hey, could be pleasantly surprised. Find out sometime next month. So then the Bears, if you're going to follow for this road trip, my friends, pack up your toques and winter coats as the Bears will go to play Hartford. That should be on I got to pull up the calendar on my computer here for this. But that will be a Wednesday in Hartford, 6:30 start. Ugh. And then a Friday 8 o'clock at 7:05 start there in Providence. So, oh boy, that's a tough one after spending nearly a month at home to go for a Wednesday in Hartford and a Friday night in Providence. That's a rough one.
Arguably the coldest times of the year too. I mean, that's these the bitter cold and some of the coldest places. I'm getting cold just thinking about them. We're talking about it here in July. It's and that's not even some of the worst of it either. The Bears have some equally tough travel coming up, but that's going to be another test. I mean, I'm sure Hartford's they're not going to take being as bad as they have been the last couple of seasons, finishing last place. I feel that they might be a team that will be kind of upstart next season, and again, no easy games. The Bears lost to Providence a couple of times, plenty of times last year. The more I'm thinking about it, where they shouldn't have lost to them, and that's. Even though they were as bad as they are, they managed to take some points and some wins off the Bears. That's not an easy one by any means. So, even if they are bad again, you can't just go up and be like, oh, yeah, we're going to go up in the middle of January and take 2 points. It's not going to be that easy. So, like you said, those are two tough ones, and then some, a little bit of home cooking afterwards.
Yeah, and that's the Wednesday nights up in Hartford. Real ones know where it would be a cavernous XL Center on those Wednesday night games there in Hartford. So, and I've been up there to see the renovations that's happened up there. They've dumped a lot of money into it, and it's good to see the People's Bank Arena, as it's called now. That to see kind of a rejuvenating of that place. Really good to see that out of them. But yeah, the Bears come back for a 4-game homestand January 10th against Wilkes-Barre. Tuesday night game against Lehigh, weather permitting. Um, and then the 15th will be then the 15th of Friday against Lehigh, and then the 16th the Toronto Marlies will come to town. The defending Calder Cup champions will come to town. So nice little home game sandwich for when we usually hit our coldest time of the year.
Yeah, exactly. It's a little, after, that kind of rough travel, it'd be good to be home for a couple of, a week of hockey, basically. That's a stretch of what, 4 games in 7 days, more or less. So,
Yeah.
you know,
Yep.
it'll be a lot. The one thing that you kind of see with the schedule when you look at, especially this front half of January, is there's a lot of games in a short period of time, followed by some particularly tough travel here for the Bears. So, they're going to have to, probably not get a lot of practice time, but manage their legs. And we saw a lot of the signings going on these last couple of weeks and
Mm-hmm.
stuff. Probably utilize some of those players. Hopefully, they don't go through too many injuries like they did last season. But you know, it's going to be one of those things where it's going to be a big test for them at that point. Not only is this the dog days of the season kind of thing, it's starting to get a little bit harder to get up for some of these games, especially when your umpteenth time playing Wilkes-Barre and Lehigh in the last month type of thing. But the fans at Giant Center always show up, and for this particular stretch, that's going to really have to carry them through this tougher set of games before they really hit the road here for a little while.
Yeah, it's a really rough stretch for the boys. As you said, coming up, and it's a lot of games in January. Like it is, like you said, it's a lot of games in a short amount of time. I mean, I think after the month of January, yeah, it'll be near the All-Star break, but we're really going to know where this team stands by the time we hit January. And I remember last year, I kind of had my breaking point with the Bears January after they had those rough 2 games against Hartford, where I really was starting to be like, okay, this team's not as good as our record indicates. And where my recap videos were getting a little angry. But we'll see by that point. And so after that, the Bears will go to play Lehigh, 3:05 start. They're at the PPL Center. And then time to hit the road, boys. As the next weekend, the Bears will do a 3-3 Friday the 22nd in Syracuse, Saturday the 23rd in Rochester, 5:05 start there in Rochester, and then a 3 o'clock start there in Utica. I already preemptively have that scheduled as one I'd like to do this year because I love that little stretch there, Syracuse, Rochester, Utica. Yes, please and thank you to all 3 of those locations. And then the following weekend, the Bears are going to travel to Cleveland, as they're basically just going to go down from New York, probably down to Cleveland. And they'll take on the Monsters the 29th and 31st. And that should wrap up a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6-game road stand to close out the month of January. Lots of games, lots of days, lots of mileage. And for all of you old school Bears fans, this reeks of those Wednesday night games in Albany, and then you travel up to like Manchester for a Saturday, or Wednesday night in Albany, and then Friday in Adirondacks, and then back home for a Saturday game. Real Bears fans know about those trips. But yeah, that just reeks of really cold bus, cold cars. Where's the nearest Tim Hortons? Because I need something warm in my hands.
Well, what's kind of nuts about this is that like I kind of underestimated this a little bit looking at it. Is that you look at the front half of January and you say, oh man, it looks like they play so many games, and they do. Don't get it twisted, but in this little stretch of games, thank goodness this first one is not a lot of travel with the, Lehigh, Toronto, and then in Lehigh. But this accounts for 2 of just 3-3s that the Bears play this season too in this little stretch here. It actually looks like it's a little bit better because they have, 4 days between the Lehigh to Syracuse, and then from Utica on the 24th to Cleveland on the 29th. But this, is just a brutal stretch of games, and 3-3 with travel is that's going to be some of the hardest hockey the Bears are going to play to really get through that stretch. It's going to be, like you said, you are going to be looking for any bit of respite that you get during that stretch. So, a lot for them. And then Cleveland is, very difficult travel too. So, it's some of their most difficult travel to get through. But, like you said, we're going to be, seeing who this Hershey Bears team is through that stretch. And thank goodness February is much lighter as a result. So it's a lot of pain now for some gain later on.
Oh yeah, and I've done those trips. They are not easy to do, and especially where up in New York, that is you're asking for snow during that time because I've been up there for those lake effect Syracuse storms. You get nailed pretty quickly. But it will be interesting for that stretch of the season. I'll be very interested to ask Zach that for our annual August interview. So we go into February, probably the last game before the All-Star break. The Bears are back home against the Phantoms. 7 o'clock start at Giants Center on February 6th, on February 3rd, and then February 6th. They will take on the Springfield Thunderboys, probably last time around at Giants Center. They'll be playing them. And then the following weekend, Hartford comes into town to double dip on a Friday and a Saturday, as then the Bears will return the favor the following weekend for a Friday, Saturday in Hartford. So 4 in a row against the Wolfpack. Yay. But those are all division games. So if the Bears need some time to try and get back in it, there's the weekend to do it.
Yeah, I was about to say I was expecting you to take your water bottle out and say, "You want it? You're going to drink up and have the Hartford." And
Oh,
you
you like Hartford? We got Hartford flavored soda in the back. We will. You want some? It's full of bitterness and regret.
It's like you said though, that stretch at the beginning of the month for everybody except for who's ever on the All Star candidacy list this year is going to be able to get some much needed R&R at home a little bit this weekend. That week, by having just the Lehigh and Springfield games. 7 and 8, you're gonna unfortunately for those guys go back to Cleveland since it's there on the 7th and the 8th this year, I believe. So you go from being there to go heading straight back there right afterwards to handle it that way. Someday the Bears will get the All-Star game again, which will be very nice. But you have the games in Hartford. That set where it's like you said, it's going to be a playoff set. It's just going to be like the Lehigh and Wilkes-Barre ones in December that we were talking about, where it's again a test of where you're at, a test of where these two teams are at. And like you said, in these stretches, no one's going to feel sorry for you. That oh, you're playing your umpteenth amount of games in this stretch. So be it. All the points count all the same. So for this Bears team, it's especially for some of these young kids that are coming in for the first time. They're getting their first taste of what an AHL schedule really looks like, and for better or for worse, they're going to be pushed and stretched to their very limits in some ways with all the little intricacies that go in there. And for the Bears, you're watching it right now. You just have to hope that they can build some solid depth and, be able to counter these sorts of things when they come up, with the right group. So lots of important planning going on right now. That's for sure.
Oh, definitely. And did they announce where the All-Star game or who has it this year?
It's Cleveland.
Oh, Cleveland.
I think it's on
Delightful.
the 7th and the 8th. So they had to go from that
Yeah,
Springfield game to Cleveland for the All-Star game, skills competition on the
yeah.
7th, and then the game itself on the 8th.
Nice. Good for them. Moving on. But yeah, yeah. So that's you'll have a bit of a respite here as you're coming back home. A couple division games here, and again, if the Bears are time you want to turn it around, now's the chance. And then to close out in the month of February, the 24th will be against the Syracuse Crunch, the one and only visit to Giants Center. And then 2 more against Springfield, the 27th and 28th. That is the 6 o'clock and 3 o'clock start taking on Springfield. So a little bit of home cooking to end the month of February.
Yeah, and this is the unfortunate stretch where we're probably going to be a little bit tired in a sense. Where we're going to be like, oh man, we've had so many home games, but you're going to have to take those and appreciate it because the Bears only really have like 5 more games at home. I could be wrong about that, 5 or 6, 5 more home games through the months of March and April. So we're we're going to go from having a lot to suddenly being very sad and without Bears hockey at home. And you'll have to actually want to consider going to Lehigh Valley to see them play on the odd time that
Mhm.
they're there in March and stuff like that. So we're definitely going to miss the Bears in that stretch. So it's a little, it's going to be a little bit interesting, but those are all tough games too, and we'll prepare to go without as they hit the road for, not thankfully not a historically long road trip like last season's was, but still for the more often than not, unfortunately, in March.
Well, you're right about that. And boy, that month of February, there's like that is a promo schedules fan's dream right there. Because God, that screams for a specialty jersey during some of those times. Like they'll bust out a weird one during those. I can just absolutely tell. So yeah, you were right, Corey. As we head into the month of March, as the next 7 of 8 will be on the road. As March 3rd, the Bears will travel out to Wilkes-Barre to take on the Baby Pens, and then head out to Charlotte for a weekend trip. 4 o'clock starts and 1 o'clock starts there in Charlotte, as is their right and custom. And then a March 13th at Lehigh. And then the Bears are back March 14th to take on Les Rockets de Laval. And then speaking of Canada, the boys will head right back out to Canada the following Wednesday to travel to the new TD Coliseum where the Hammers play. And then they'll take on Belleville the 19th. And then in Quebec for 3 o'clock start against Les Rockets de Laval. So very heavy road course. I think I read like the last 15 out of 19 are all on the road for the Hershey Bears. So we expect that in the month of March, but there it is, and there's a lot of it.
It's kind of interesting the difference in the Canadian trip this year too, because last year we saw them play Belleville twice, and then
Mm-hmm.
Laval, and then Laval was sandwiched in there, and then I think Toronto was right afterwards. This year it's a little bit different because Hamilton kind of usurps that. There's only 2 games against Belleville this year after being 4 at least the last couple.
Yeah.
Um, so that's kind of another pocket of areas where the games that were lost probably go back into feeding more of Wilkes-Barre and Lehigh Valley in some ways.
Mm-hmm.
But just logistically makes more sense, of course, I'm sure, with the way the schedule is this year. And the less time you have to spend in Canada for the Bears, it's so far away type of thing, the better, honestly. So it'll be the first time the Bears have been up in Hamilton in a very long time, and
Very much so.
it'll be interesting to be back at the scene of the crime where the Bears, won the 1997 Calder Cup.
Oh,
So that'll
yes.
be kind of cool too.
The Fighting Messiers up there. And a line on commentary I can't say any more today. But yeah, going up to see Hamilton again to take on the Hammers. The PWHL team there in Hamilton is going to have a much cooler name than them. I'm calling it right now. They are. But yeah, and it's really odd to do a Canada trip in mid-March. Usually when you think Canada, it's like mid-February, mid-January. Or for those who know, maybe we do Canada extremely early in October. We've done that before, especially when St. John's was in the league. We'd head to Newfoundland in October just to get it out of the way. So it's just it's weird to see that, and it's definitely one I've circled with my friends if I could get a passport in time. It's one I'd consider doing. So yeah, it's just interesting to see that. And by the way, the trade deadline weekend will be when the boys are in Charlotte again. It always seems, I know the Bears are always on the road when that happens, but it always seems like it's down in Charlotte when that tends to happen. So, so to finish out the month of March, the boys come back home to take on Utica for the one and only time at Giant Center on the 24th. Head out to Wilkes-Barre the 26th. Return the favor on the 27th, back home at Giant Center. And then out for a little Texas two-step to take on the Texas Stars March 30th and 31st. And for those of you who don't have a calendar in front of you, that is a Tuesday and a Wednesday, 8 o'clock local start time. So a rare Tuesday-Wednesday game but I know that's pretty much the norm for a lot of Western Conference opponents.
Yeah, it is a little bit of an unusual schedule, and like you said, you go from Utica at home, thankfully, a week at home to, suddenly this where it's like, oh, hey, 8 p.m. start times Eastern time for us is, the latest start time we're going to have all season. Thank goodness, it's almost going to be like reliving those playoff games down there when the Bears won three straight in Texas in 2010 to, come back with a 3-2 series edge type of thing where, if you remember that game five right before Alexander Giroux's goal was just before midnight. Those games went pretty
Hmm.
long, so
Yeah.
uh, it'll almost be like a little trip back in time for that in some ways. Not only just because the Bears are there for the first time in forever, but just the setting is exactly right, and we wouldn't have it any other way. That closes out an important chapter of the season for the Bears going into April. If it's anything like last season, they may still be chasing for a playoff spot by that point.
Yeah, and that's around the time of year where you do a little bit of scoreboard watching, or that's where the scoreboard watching keeps in, depending on where you are, especially with our division as the way it's going to be. But we'll cover that on another show. But as we head into the month of April, another weekend roadie, except up in the Northeast, Saturday, April 3rd against Providence, and then April 4th, a 3 o'clock start there out there in Springfield. Um, One last Northeastern road trip, and that's going to be a real interesting one, much like last year when the Bears had that Northeast road trip at the beginning of March, and that nearly torpedoed the season as the Bears, blew it late against the Providence Bruins. I feel like that's going to be a really big weekend against Providence and Springfield that weekend.
The travel logistics alone are pretty crazy on that one too. So you're gonna, I'd be curious to see the itinerary and how the travel logistics work to go from Texas on that Wednesday. Most likely, I wouldn't be surprised if it's directly to Providence or some
Probably.
semblance of it to, yeah, to head straight there kind of thing. But like you said, those Providence, those Upper Atlantic teams always give the Bears fits, and that was the game in Providence around that time when Clay Stevenson was injured. And,
Hmm.
you sort of,
Yep.
like you said, really almost just torpedoed the season because of how valuable he was to last year's squad. So hopefully we don't get a repeat of that anytime soon. But, a real interesting way to close out the season and close out the travel books in many ways outside of the state of Pennsylvania. Playing some odd opponents, then some, lesser familiar ones, and then right back home to what you'd expect at the end of the season. More Lehigh Valley and Wilkes-Barre.
Yep. Local flavor to end the season. I think that should be a Wednesday night, Lehigh Valley at home. And then one last time up to Wilkes-Barre, regular season, with feeling up there in Wilkes-Barre, 7:05 start up there at Mohegan Sun Arena. And then Saturday, April 10th to end the season, 6 o'clock start. 6 o'clock start will end it there. That will be the last game of the Bears season again, playoffs permitting. 6 o'clock start there against Lehigh. And, your last 5 games of the season are all divisional, and 3 of them are in state. So, there it is right there. You want to close it out, there you go.
And like we mentioned kind of at the beginning, now that we're at the end here too, that this is, not only is the season finale game on a Saturday at a 6 p.m. start also, kind of bringing it full circle from the beginning of the season, is that it's also a week earlier. Typically you'd probably see that next week, the 18th, probably be your last home game in a different variation of the schedule over the years. But that's, just how we're rolling here with things. And you'd probably expect the first round series to, kick off within that next week, 12th into the 16th, and then probably turn around that next week into, the division semifinals. So it'll be interesting. You'll have to earn your May hockey again. We'll put it that way. Is that
Yeah.
you will have to earn getting to May. Probably by the division finals. Starting. Kind of like the days of old, and maybe like I'm thinking back to like the 2016 run, for instance, where you really had to earn your way into the month of May. The last couple of years with this format and how late it goes, it was kind of given. This year, you're going to have to earn getting May hockey this season. It'll, be even harder thing to get into June. That's for sure.
Yeah, and definitely, like you said, ending sooner, unless, well, we don't really have that, but we'll have to see where they line things up. But, you're probably going to get that week off around tax season. And then, and then, they'll, but I think the way the North did it was that they started a lot of those series early. Then once around the 4-5 wrapped up, I think the 2-3 started early, and then once the one knew where they were, they started up. But anyway, yeah, like you're going to have to win a series to play May hockey. It's no longer just getting that bye and then you'll start at like the end of April. Like if you get bounced early, you're not playing hockey past May 1st. So it'll be interesting to see how this sets up. And, I'm all for the Calder Cup playoffs ending a little bit sooner, more around the time the NHL does. I've always liked it when the two leagues kind of wrap up around the same time. But that's just me, and that's the complete Bears schedule. Very home heavy in around the holidays. But I expect nothing less when it comes to the Bears when concerning stuff like that. So, we'll be playing Texas this year. I'm very excited for that. And, we'll see how a lot of this is. And don't forget, Bears fans, it's only July. It's only July. This is just the little bit of the layer cake that is the Hershey Bears season. We still got promos to go. We've still got more home, whatever stuff they're going to add, more player signings, more and more stuff to where it eventually becomes the delicious 7-layer cake that's known as Hershey Bears hockey. I'm making a lot of you hungry. I understand that. That becomes the delicious 7-layer cake that we all know and love every year. So, we love doing this show, but must I remind you, boys and fans who listen to this, it's only July.
Yeah, we're getting there. The good news about it, like you said, there's still a lot to talk about. The promo schedule is usually its own reward of being able to say, like, hey, the teddy bear toss is locked in for this day. Even the sillier fun ones like halfway to summer, I'm sure they're going to think of some new ones. I'd personally love it if they brought back Star Wars night. Those were always kind of neat to have, but I understand that not necessarily an everyday kind of thing, but they usually find a way to put something interesting there and make it a little interesting. We had some player signings even today before we got on the air type of thing, which I'm sure, Richard, you're probably going to cover in a separate stream once we start talking about how our lineups work, how other teams' lineups are looking type of thing in the inside of our division, stuff like that. The good news that's, seems to be quality again. It seems like the Bears should be a contending team again, which, hopefully as long as everything adds up on paper and we don't have anybody skipping out of town after the first couple of weeks or something like that, hopefully it should hold steady here too. So, lots to look forward to, like you said.
Yeah. And, hopefully we don't have stuff like that again this year. Now that we actually had, we're not wondering who our coach is all the way into August. So yeah, it's there's a lot more to go from here, but from this point onward, unfortunately, Bears fans, it's a long off season. Good gosh, is it a long off season, and we're gonna shove out into that long. We're going to push off into that long trek across the desert that's known as the rest of the summer before Hershey Bears hockey comes back around again. And that'll do it for the Grit and Bear It podcast this week. But before we go, Corey, why don't you tell Bears fans where they can find you and what you're doing?
Oh, yeah. It's always the usual spots. Bears Hockey Nation. We're doing a lot of stuff over the summer. We're probably going to be doing I think the next big thing, as long as the Bears stop signing players and I can finish writing it, is, talking about where we're at with the, how the Bears lineup's looking ahead of time. We're going to be doing some crystal ball looking to see how, the lineup's looking and how some of these pieces fit together. with the team here. So we'll be doing stuff all summer long, saying thank yous to some of the guys that departed still. We did a couple last week, and I have a couple more in the pipeline ahead of time. So, we'll have plenty of good reading material over the course of the summer, and hopefully I don't dry up too much in the month of August to, keep pumping that out ahead of the time with the season starting. So we'll be doing lots of stuff there over the summer.
Yeah, great to hear that, Corey. As usual, love having you on, man. Love having you on, brother. Love doing this show every year. We'll get together again, and we'll look down the teams as we'll get closer to once hockey rolls back around. We'll be doing this once again closer to the season. And the Grit and Barrett podcast is not going anywhere during the summer, ladies and gentlemen. Tales from the Road will be returning, as I will be talking about the PWHL, the New Jersey Devils, and the Northeast road trip from this past year, with maybe some minor league baseball thrown in there a little bit. We'll talk about that as well. Once we get to August, our annual Zach Fish interview will happen as well. Make sure you subscribe to this podcast wherever you get your podcasts. Go check out the Mike Vecchione interview we did last month in June. Oh, he was such a good sport to be able to do that as well. And as usual, I just want to, before we do go, want to talk about some very serious, for those of you that are watching. I've written a book called Firechild. It is a swords and sorcery quest fantasy book. It goes live on Amazon August 1st, and I'm really excited that this is going to get published. It is available in paperback and digital on Kindle. So if that's up your alley on August 1st, please download or leave a review out on Amazon, as it will really help as well. And there'll be other ways that I can put this out there too. I'm hoping to get this distributed locally. So I just wanted to put that out there. So thank you very much, Bears fans. And I'm Richard Blosser. Until next time, go Bears. We'll catch you next time.